Rain poured outside, as if the sky itself mourned her misery. Celeste Morgan sat alone in the dimly lit dressing room, still wearing the ivory wedding gown she had chosen with trembling hands, hoping to finally be cherished. Her eyes were red, swollen, and hollow, the once vibrant glow now replaced by devastation. Moments earlier, the grand ballroom echoed not with celebration, but with gasps and cruel laughter. Instead of becoming Damian Blackwood's wife, she had watched him kiss her best friend, Sabrina Voss, in front of everyone. A whisper passed through the crowd. Celeste was just the decoy bride. The humiliation burned her skin as Damian coldly walked away, never glancing back. The betrayal was not new. For years, she had clung to blind love, defending Damian when he neglected her, excused his coldness, and accepted his lies. She once believed Sabrina was her only friend, but the truth was far worse. The two people she trusted most had conspired behind her back, stealing not only her wedding but her dignity. Damian's mother had sneered, calling Celeste too ordinary to ever be a Blackwood. Even the bridesmaids had smirked when the switch happened, their phones recording her breakdown like it was entertainment. Celeste's sobs shattered the silence, echoing off the marble walls. It wasn't just a ruined wedding, it was the burial of her entire past. She ran through the streets in the pouring rain, her white gown trailing behind her like a ghost of what could have been. No one came after her, not Damian, not Sabrina, not even her family, who had been bought off long ago. She collapsed on the pavement near a subway station, soaking wet, heartbroken and trembling. Strangers passed by, some pausing to whisper, some simply staring. No one knew her story, and no one cared. But as Celeste lay there sobbing, something shifted inside her. A cold, bitter realization settled. She had been nothing but a pawn. And now, she would burn every piece of her old self down to the ground. That night, she disappeared. When she returned years later, it was not as Celeste Morgan, the humiliated bride, but as Celeste Monroe, founder of a global skincare empire, beauty restored, mind sharpened, and heart locked away. Damian Blackwood was now on the brink of losing everything, his business floundering, betrayed by Sabrina, who ran off with his rival and leaked all his secrets. But he didn't know the worst of it yet. The woman he had once discarded was now the silent investor saving the very companies he begged for help. Celeste walked through the same ballroom again, not in a wedding dress, but in a crimson gown of vengeance. The crowd gasped again, but this time it was in awe. And when Damian reached out for her, trembling and broken, she didn't even flinch. Celeste stood frozen in place, the weight of betrayal pressing down like a crushing avalanche. The golden engagement ring that once adorned her finger now lay discarded on the marble floor, symbolizing the end of a love she thought would last forever. Her breath caught in her throat as she watched Damian, her fiancé, hold Sabrina's hand without a hint of shame. Their laughter pierced her ears, cruel reminders that love could rot into poison. The party guests whispered behind flutes of champagne, their judgmental eyes trained on her trembling form. Celeste's hands clenched at her sides as humiliation painted her cheeks crimson. She turned to her father for support, but he merely glanced away, as if ashamed to claim her. Her heart shattered further when Sabrina looked back at her with a victorious smirk, eyes gleaming with malice. Every piece of trust she'd held dear was now pulverized beneath their betrayal. Tears spilled down her face, and she could barely breathe as the world she knew crumbled in front of everyone. She ran into the pouring rain outside, her sobs drowned by the storm raging above. Lightning cracked across the sky, echoing the storm within her soul. Her white dress clung to her skin, drenched and tattered like her spirit. Memories of stolen kisses, whispered promises, and hopeful dreams stabbed her like knives. She screamed into the night, hoping the wind would carry away her pain. But no one came. Not Damian. Not her father. Not even the friend who once promised to protect her from the world. Celeste dropped to her knees, her cries muffled by the rain-soaked earth. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to be alone. Days turned into weeks, yet the pain clung to her like a shadow. The media painted her as the bitter ex, while Sabrina played the doting, innocent fiancé. Lies spread like wildfire, claims that Celeste had been controlling, manipulative, and unstable. Damien gave interviews claiming he had escaped toxicity, twisting the truth into a grotesque performance. Even people she once called friends began to keep their distance, unsure of what to believe. Celeste cried herself to sleep each night, clinging to the tattered remains of her dignity. She longed for someone, anyone, to see her truth. But the world was content watching her fall. Every headline, every whisper, was another stab to her heart. The girl who once believed in love was now a shell drowning in grief. But pain, as cruel as it was, carved resilience into her bones. Celeste began to pick up the pieces, even if her hands bled from touching the shards. She applied for college again, determined to rebuild from the ashes. Alone in her small apartment, she poured herself into study, art, and self-healing. Every sleepless night became a step forward, even when the tears wouldn't stop. She stopped reading the tabloids, stopped checking Damien's social media, stopped searching for closure from people who never loved her. Slowly, her scars began to close. Her laughter, though quiet, returned in flickers. She met new people, peers who saw her as more than the scandal, more than the broken ex. Celeste was still afraid, still healing, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a sliver of light. She saw Damien again by accident at a bookstore, his arm draped lazily around Sabrina's shoulders. The sight sent a jolt through her, but instead of breaking down, she simply smiled and turned away. Sabrina tried to provoke her with loud, fake laughter, but Celeste didn't look back. That night, she cried again, but this time, the tears were mixed with pride. She had survived. She was surviving. And though the road ahead was still steep, she was no longer walking backward. With trembling hands and a heart still bruised, Celeste vowed to never let anyone dim her light again. She didn't need Damien. She didn't need false friends. All she needed was herself. Celeste woke up to the sound of her alarm, her eyes still swollen from last night's tears. But instead of burying herself under the covers, she sat up with quiet determination. The ache in her heart remained, but so did a flicker of resolve that hadn't existed before. She no longer had the luxury to break. Her only choice was to move forward. Though her reflection still showed a girl shattered by betrayal, her soul was now stitched with silent strength. She dressed in neutral tones, pulled her hair into a neat bun, and set out to face her first day at her new university. With no friends to sit beside, she took a seat in the back corner of the lecture hall, unnoticed and alone. Yet deep down, Celeste preferred it that way. Obscurity was safer than being heard again. As the professor droned on about ethical dilemmas in AI, she scribbled notes furiously, eager to drown in anything that didn't remind her of Damien or Sabrina. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of purpose that wasn't tied to pleasing others. But fate had a cruel sense of humor. Damien was now enrolled in the same business track. When she saw him walk into the same classroom during their afternoon seminar, her fingers tightened around her pen. He spotted her instantly and froze mid-step, his cocky smile faltering. The smugness in his eyes gave way to something unreadable: regret, surprise, maybe even guilt. But Celeste quickly looked away, refusing to give him even a flicker of recognition. Her hands trembled under the desk, her heartbeat a pounding drum of old wounds. Damien sat 2 rows away, casting furtive glances her way throughout the lecture. Celeste didn't cry, not this time. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. She had already bled enough for him, and now her wounds were closing, no matter how much they stung. When the lecture ended, she walked out without a word, her heels echoing with quiet defiance. Rumors began to spread again, the student body abuzz with whispers of the infamous triangle. Sabrina, who enrolled soon after Damien, made her presence felt by flaunting her relationship in the hallways. She'd brush past Celeste, loudly mocking her shoes, her hair, her clothes, anything she could grasp at. But this wasn't the same Celeste who once wept in the rain. With each insult, Celeste remained unmoved, her silence more cutting than any retort. Deep down, it frustrated Sabrina to no end. When Sabrina accidentally spilled coffee on Celeste's laptop during a study session, expecting a dramatic outburst, Celeste simply picked it up and walked out. Later that week, Celeste turned in a group project with a polished app prototype, coded from scratch in 2 days, earning praise from the entire department. While Sabrina gloated over designer heels, Celeste built a future one skill at a time. Slowly, admiration replaced mockery, and people began to notice the quiet brilliance that radiated from her. Her resilience caught the attention of someone else, Zach Everett, the quiet but well-respected top student in her software engineering class. Zach was known for his stoicism, his aloof charm, and most of all, his unparalleled intellect. Celeste was hesitant when he first approached her, thinking it was a prank or pity. But Zach never treated her like glass. He challenged her ideas, debated her theories, and even offered help without strings. For the first time, she found herself smiling during coding sessions, her laughter no longer foreign to her ears. Zach never pried into her past, and Celeste was grateful for it. He saw her not as the girl who got left at the altar, but as the woman building her own empire. When he invited her for coffee after class, her heart fluttered, unsure if it was nerves or the early whispers of hope. She didn't say yes right away, but something about Zach's steady gaze made her believe she could feel something again. Something real. That night, Celeste cried quietly in her room, not because of pain, but because healing had begun. She remembered the old Celeste, the one who cried for love, who begged for loyalty, who shattered for someone who never deserved her. And then she looked at the woman she was becoming, strong, brilliant, respected, and finally seen. It wasn't easy. Every step forward was haunted by whispers of the past. But she kept walking. And even when Damien tried to catch up to her after class, calling her name with desperation she had once longed for, she didn't turn around. She didn't need closure anymore. She was writing her own ending now, and Damien had no place in it. Celeste thought she had prepared herself for the next phase of healing, but nothing could have prepared her for seeing Damien every day on campus. He seemed to appear wherever she went, at the library, outside the cafeteria, in the parking lot, always just a little too close for coincidence. At first, she thought it was paranoia, but then he began leaving notes in her locker. "Can we talk?" they read. "I made a mistake." She tore each one to pieces, without a second glance. His voice haunted her in the lecture halls, and his eyes followed her like a shadow desperate for light. But Celeste refused to give him the spotlight again. Her heart still bore the bruises of his betrayal, and his sudden interest only reopened old wounds. Yet she wouldn't cry, not in front of him, not anymore. Sabrina, on the other hand, had become more aggressive as the days passed. Her insults sharpened with venom, her laughter louder and more forced when Zach was around. One day, during a campus-wide innovation contest, Celeste was one of the finalists. Sabrina, threatened by her success, spread a vicious rumor claiming Celeste had plagiarized her submission. When Celeste entered the auditorium, people were whispering behind their hands, and her name trended in the university forum with accusations. The humiliation struck hard, and for a moment, she stood frozen under the bright lights, her face pale and her fingers numb. But then Zach walked onto the stage and publicly stated that he had reviewed Celeste's code himself. It was original, genius even. The room fell silent, and the panel awarded her the first prize. Celeste held the trophy with trembling hands, fighting back tears, not of shame, but of pride. That night, Damien cornered her in the library, looking broken, like a shell of the man she once loved. His voice was hoarse as he pleaded, "Celeste, please just hear me out." She looked at him coldly, her arms folded, her face unreadable. "Now you want to talk? After you made me feel worthless?" Her voice didn't crack, but her eyes shimmered with years of pain. He fell to his knees in the quiet aisle between shelves, grabbing her hand as tears rolled down his face. "I was blind. Sabrina tricked me. I lost everything when I lost you." But Celeste shook him off, stepping back as her voice grew louder. You didn't lose me, Damien. You threw me away. Her sob caught in her throat, but she refused to let it fall. And I won't let you break me again. Words spread fast about Damien's breakdown, and the perfect image he and Sabrina once painted began to crumble. Sabrina's insecurities exploded. Jealousy consumed her as she saw Damien running after Celeste. In a fit of rage, she slapped Damien in public after accusing him of cheating emotionally. Photos circulated online, and the illusion of their power couple status disintegrated overnight. Sponsors pulled out of a startup Sabrina had launched, and her image took a severe blow. People who once fawned over her began calling her manipulative and fake. Celeste, meanwhile, continued to shine. Not by lashing out, but simply by living her truth. She was chosen to intern at a leading AI firm, outpacing even Zach in rankings, though he celebrated her win without envy. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Sabrina was unraveling while Celeste was ascending. Despite the emotional storms, Celeste found herself laughing more, especially when Zach was around. He took her on walks in the botanical garden, where the sun always seemed gentler and the wind kinder. There, she confessed how Damien's betrayal had shattered her to the point of no return. Zach didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix her. He just listened, quietly, patiently, with a gaze that didn't judge. "You're stronger than you realize," he finally said, brushing a tear from her cheek. "But you don't have to be strong alone." Her heart fluttered, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. She wasn't ready for love, not yet, but for the first time, she didn't flinch at the thought. Maybe, just maybe, her heart could learn to beat without pain again. And maybe this time, it would beat for someone who knew her worth. Celeste sat on the university rooftop one evening, her sketchpad resting on her knees as the sun dipped below the skyline. She wasn't drawing, though, just staring at the blank page, lost in thought. The calm was shattered when a frantic call from her friend Mira came through. "Celeste, check the student portal. Your grades have been flagged for academic dishonesty again." Panic surged through her as she rushed back to her dorm and logged in. Sure enough, her profile was marked with a disciplinary note, claiming she had stolen a professor's research for her latest AI project. Her vision blurred, her chest tightening with betrayal and fear. She knew instantly that only one person would stoop this low. Sabrina, the girl who used to braid her hair, now stabbing her repeatedly from behind. Celeste curled on her bed, tears spilling over as she shook in silent sobs. She was exhausted from being strong. The next day, Celeste was called into a disciplinary hearing before the academic board. She walked into the room with trembling legs, facing 5 stern professors and 1 empty chair meant for her accuser. As she sat down, Sabrina strolled in confidently, wearing a tight blouse and crocodile tears. "I just wanted to protect the integrity of our university," she lied, voice trembling with fake concern. Celeste tried to defend herself, voice quaking. "Please. I wrote every line of that code myself." But they looked at her with suspicion. As the hearing dragged on, Celeste's hands were ice cold, her voice barely audible. She thought she would collapse under the weight of humiliation. Then, without warning, Zach burst into the room, holding a USB stick in his hand. "I have the metadata for her files," he declared. "Timestamps, version control, proof that Celeste developed everything from scratch." The silence that followed was thunderous. One of the professors examined the data, eyebrows raising as he reviewed the irrefutable evidence. "Miss Everhart," he said, turning to Sabrina, "this contradicts your claims." Sabrina stammered, trying to cover her tracks. "I must have made a mistake. Maybe the files were switched, but the board was no longer buying her act." "You will be subject to an investigation," they informed her, and she stormed out in disgrace. Celeste sat frozen, disbelief and relief colliding in her chest. As the board apologized for the false accusation, she burst into tears, not just from vindication, but from sheer emotional exhaustion. Zach wrapped his arm around her shoulders gently and whispered, "You're safe now." She clung to him, letting the tears fall, her body racked with silent sobs. News of Sabrina's attempted sabotage exploded across campus. Students who once admired her started whispering behind her back, calling her a fraud. She was suspended pending investigation, her sponsors rescinded their offers, and her social media turned into a war zone. Comments flooded her posts. "You ruined someone's life out of jealousy? We supported the wrong woman." Even Damien, who had been avoiding her since the slap, distanced himself completely. The betrayal she once dished out now returned tenfold. Alone and exposed, Sabrina fell from grace so spectacularly that even professors refused to write her recommendation letters. Meanwhile, Celeste was invited to speak at a prestigious tech symposium. She stood on stage, voice steady, eyes full of pride, while applause rang around her. It was the first time she truly believed she was more than what others had made her feel. And the first time she didn't cry out of pain but triumph. But pain had not fully left her heart. That night, after all the applause had faded, Celeste sat by her window, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "Why did it have to hurt so much?" she whispered into the darkness. Memories of Damien's betrayal and Sabrina's poison still weighed heavy in her soul. Even with victories, the scars felt fresh. She thought of how quickly people had believed lies about her, how easily her truth had been buried under someone else's fake tears. She buried her face into her pillow, muffling the sobs. But as dawn painted her room in gold, she sat up, wiped her cheeks, and whispered, "They don't get to win." With Zach's loyalty, her hard-earned strength, and the truth finally on her side, Celeste was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to heal. And this time, her journey wouldn't be stolen. Celeste was just exiting her artificial intelligence lab when she saw him, Damien, standing by the hallway like a ghost from a bitter memory. He looked thinner, tired, as though the world had worn him down since their last confrontation. "Celeste, please," he said, stepping forward, voice hoarse. "I made a mistake. I was blinded by Sabrina. But I see it all now." She froze, her blood turning cold. Her heart screamed from old wounds, but she kept her expression stoic. "You see it now," she echoed bitterly. "After I was humiliated, destroyed, and nearly expelled because of the two of you?" Her voice cracked, but she didn't let the tears fall this time. Damien reached out to touch her, but she stepped back sharply. "Don't ever touch me again." The desperation in his eyes was pathetic. "I was a fool," he said, voice breaking. "I let her poison my mind against you. But I never stopped loving you, Celeste. Please just give me one more chance." Her breath hitched at the audacity. He stood before her with those same lips that once called her useless, now begging for her love. She wanted to scream, to cry, to shake him until he understood what he'd done. "You didn't just break my heart," she said quietly. "You shattered the girl I used to be." People passing by stopped to watch, murmuring as the scene unfolded. And yet Damien didn't care. He sank to his knees in front of her, crying shamelessly in the hallway. But Celeste, lips trembling, simply walked away. News of Damien's public breakdown spread through campus like wildfire. People whispered how the once confident heir to a prestigious conglomerate had fallen to his knees for the girl he betrayed. Some pitied him, others sneered, remembering how cruelly he had discarded Celeste. Sabrina, too, was drowning in her own karma. Her internship was revoked, her online followers dropped by the thousands, and she was caught shoplifting from a luxury store. When confronted, she had the audacity to scream, "It's all because of that witch Celeste." The video went viral, and public opinion turned viciously against her. Her life was now a mockery, a downfall so dramatic it left no room for sympathy. Celeste watched it all unfold in silence, her heart conflicted. There was a strange comfort in justice, yet also a sadness that everything had to come to this. Despite all of it, Celeste still cried in private. Healing wasn't linear, and there were nights she'd wake up from nightmares, Damien laughing, Sabrina smirking, her world collapsing. Zach was always there. He never pried, never asked her to be stronger than she felt. He simply sat beside her, arms around her shoulders, letting her cry against his chest. "You're allowed to break sometimes," he would whisper, brushing away her tears. "You don't have to hold it all in." Slowly, she began to rely on his presence, trust in his steadiness. He never promised her the world. He simply showed her she deserved one. And that, more than any apology or grand gesture, began to stitch her broken heart back together. One day, Celeste saw Damien again, this time in the rain, standing outside her lecture hall with soaked flowers in hand. He tried once more. "Please, I'll wait forever," he said, shivering, eyes red from crying. But she just looked at him with quiet, mournful strength. "I waited for you when it mattered," she said, voice calm. "But you chose her. You broke me. Now, I've rebuilt myself, and there's no room for you in this new version of me." She walked past him, leaving him in the downpour. The petals of his bouquet fell to the sidewalk, crushed under indifferent shoes. Behind her, Zach waited with an umbrella and a warm smile. She slipped her hand into his without looking back. Sabrina's once sparkling life had turned to dust. The lavish parties, designer clothes, and adoring fans were now nothing but memories. Her face, once plastered all over social media, was now buried beneath headlines of scandal and disgrace. Her sponsorships dropped her one after another, and even her so-called friends vanished like smoke. She tried to hold on to her pride, posting photos with fake smiles, pretending she was still winning. But behind closed doors, she was screaming because her fame was gone, and so was Damien's love. He stopped answering her calls, stopped defending her, and even moved out of their shared apartment. "You said you loved me," she shouted into her cracked phone screen, tears streaking her once flawless makeup. But there was no reply, only silence. The silence of a world that no longer cared. Her mental state crumbled with each passing day. She started drinking too much, partying with strangers just to feel something. She watched videos of Celeste speaking at conferences, winning awards, smiling beside Zach, and it enraged her. She was nothing. Sabrina snarled to the mirror. She was supposed to break. She threw the glass across the room, shattering it like the illusion she once lived in. Her mother disowned her, her father cut off her cards, and her modeling agency blacklisted her for her attitude and instability. Alone and desperate, she begged Damien to come back. "We can start over," she whimpered during a drunken call. "We were perfect together." But Damien, ruined in his own way, simply hung up. Meanwhile, Celeste thrived in ways no one had ever imagined. Her face now graced academic journals, and her AI innovations attracted global attention. She was invited to an international tech summit where she delivered a speech that had the audience in tears. But success didn't erase pain, it gave it meaning. Every time she smiled on stage, she thought of how far she'd come from crying on that cold dorm floor. "You inspire so many," Zach whispered as they stood on a rooftop after the event. "But do you know who you inspire most?" She turned to him, her eyes glistening. "Who?" she asked softly. "Me," he said, pulling her close. For the first time in years, Celeste felt whole, seen not for her past, but for her strength. Damien, in contrast, had spiraled. After his public breakdown and the collapse of his engagement, his father's company had suffered severe losses. Investors withdrew, blaming Damien's personal scandal for the drop in credibility. He had to sell his car, move into a small rental, and even apply for jobs he once looked down upon. At night, he sat in darkness, staring at old photos of Celeste, full of regret. He remembered the way she used to smile at him, believe in him, love him without reservation. Now she belonged to someone else, someone better, someone who never hurt her. "I lost her forever," he whispered into the silence. He tried reaching her again, sending long emails filled with apologies and promises. But they were never opened. She had moved on. Celeste's peace was not built on revenge. It was built on freedom. Freedom from pain, from needing anyone's validation, from clinging to people who never saw her worth. At a charity gala, she stood beside Zach, glowing in a soft ivory gown. Cameras flashed, people clapped, and she gave a short speech about resilience. From the crowd, Damien watched in the shadows, uninvited, unseen. Sabrina wasn't there. She'd been admitted to rehab after a very public breakdown. Karma had come full circle, and Celeste hadn't needed to lift a single finger. The universe had done the work. That night, as she danced slowly with Zach under golden lights, she smiled not because she'd won, but because she was finally free. And nothing, not even Damien's broken whispers, could take that away. Damien sat in the pouring rain outside Celeste's apartment building, soaked and shivering. He had been waiting there for hours, clutching a bouquet of wilted flowers. Every drop that hit his face reminded him of the tears she once cried for him, tears he never saw, never cared about. His heart pounded when he finally saw her step out of the building, umbrella in hand, elegance radiating from her like sunlight. "Celeste," he called out, voice cracking with desperation. She paused, her eyes narrowing as she recognized him. "Please," he said, stepping toward her. "I just need a moment." But Celeste's face held no warmth, only cold indifference. "You had a lifetime of moments," she said, her voice firm, "and you threw them all away." Damien fell to his knees, the bouquet slipping from his hands into a puddle. "I was wrong," he choked. "I was blind and stupid, and I lost everything." His sobs were guttural, ugly real. The powerful CEO, who once humiliated her, was now begging on the streets like a broken man. A few pedestrians stared, whispering among themselves, taking videos. Celeste's chest tightened, not with pity, but with memories of the nights she cried in silence, praying for someone to notice her pain. "You didn't care when I was shattered," she said, her eyes hard. "Why should I care now?" Damien looked up, rain mixing with tears. "Because I finally see you," he whispered. "Too late," she replied, turning away without another word. Inside her car, Celeste let out a shaky breath. Zach reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, though her heart beat a little too fast. "I'm not crying for him," she whispered, eyes glistening. "I'm crying because the girl I used to be would have taken him back." Zach pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "But you're not that girl anymore," he said.
"You're a queen now, Celeste."
"A phoenix." She leaned into him, grateful, feeling both pain and relief flood her. "I don't hate him," she admitted. "I just don't want to waste my love anymore." And with that, she let go of Damien, of the past, of the broken pieces that no longer fit who she'd become. Meanwhile, Sabrina's life continued its violent unraveling. Videos of her breakdown at a nightclub went viral, and her publicist dropped her the next day. Rumors circulated that she had stolen funds from a brand she once promoted, sparking a legal investigation. She was evicted from her condo and ended up staying in a cheap motel room that reeked of mildew and regret. Her reflection mocked her. Messy hair, puffy eyes, bruised ego. She tried reaching out to Damien, hoping for comfort, only to be blocked. "You said we'd destroy her together," she screamed at an empty wall. Her screams echoed back at her, unanswered. With every day, it became clearer. The world had turned its back on her, just like she once turned her back on Celeste. But Celeste didn't care for revenge anymore. Her heart had been through too much, and she had finally reached a place of healing. She worked alongside Zach at their startup, which had just secured its first international investor. Her days were filled with creation, compassion, and purpose. Sometimes, when she passed her old college building, she'd pause for a moment, remembering the girl who once walked those halls, invisible and broken. But then she'd smile, because that girl had grown wings. That girl had survived. That girl had loved deeply, lost terribly, and still managed to rise. She was no longer someone's second choice. She was her own first choice. And nothing, no ghost from the past, could dim the brilliance of her future. Damien stared at the mirror in his apartment, barely recognizing the man looking back at him. His once flawless face was now marked by a scar across his jawline, a reminder of the accident that cost him not only his looks, but the last shred of pride he clung to. The empire he built was crumbling, stock prices plummeting after news of internal fraud surfaced. Investors pulled out one after another, and employees began to resign en masse. Alone, abandoned, and disgraced, Damien tried to reach Celeste again, but she had blocked every number, email, and account. "Please," he whispered to the mirror, tears falling freely. "Just one more chance." But even his own reflection offered him no mercy. It only showed the shattered man left behind in Celeste's absence, pitiful and empty. He tried attending a business gala, hoping to salvage his image, but no one gave him a second glance. Whispers followed him like ghosts, mocking him. "That's the man who left the girl who became a tech genius. He traded a diamond for a stone." The words clung to his skin like frost. At the center of the room, he saw Celeste and Zach, radiant and untouchable. They didn't even notice him. She was laughing, her hand in Zach's, eyes filled with light he never gave her. Damien stumbled back, the pain a physical thing. He remembered all the times she smiled at him, waited for him, loved him, and he remembered all the times he broke her heart. He had destroyed something precious, and now he lived in the ruins of what could have been. Sabrina, too, had reached her breaking point. She wandered the city in designer clothes she could no longer afford, clutching a shattered phone and begging paparazzi to take her picture. But no one cared anymore. Brands rejected her. Agencies blacklisted her. Her once perfect social media presence was reduced to bitter rants and deleted posts. "Why is she the one who wins?" she screamed one night in a drunken rage. "I had it all. I was the chosen one." But her cries went unheard, drowned in the emptiness of a hotel hallway. She reached out to old friends, only to be met with silence or blocked numbers. Even her family had distanced themselves, ashamed of the scandal she brought. Karma didn't just visit her, it devoured her whole. Celeste, unaware of their latest failures, was busy chasing her dreams and building new ones. She had just received an award in innovation for her AI project that helped diagnose rare diseases faster. Cameras flashed as she walked across the stage, elegance in every step. Zach watched proudly from the front row, clapping the loudest. After the ceremony, he took her aside and handed her a small velvet box. Her heart stopped. "I know your past was filled with pain," he said gently. "But if you let me, I want to give you a future filled with love." Inside the box was a delicate ring, shaped like a crescent moon, the one symbol she always loved. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Yes." She wasn't just saying yes to him, but to herself, to life, and to love reborn. Back in his dim apartment, Damien scrolled through the photos of the engagement online. The comments were all filled with celebration and awe. "She deserves it. She finally found her light. That's the face of a woman who won." His thumb trembled as he reached for the like button, but couldn't bring himself to press it. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was Sabrina. "Everything's gone. Are you happy now?" He didn't reply. He stared at the ceiling, remembering the girl who once cried silently in the rain, the girl he laughed at, ignored, broke. That girl had risen higher than he could ever reach now. And he, Damien Hale, the man who once had it all, now had nothing but regret. The wedding invitations arrived in thick ivory envelopes embossed with gold, each one a symbol of Celeste's new beginning. The world buzzed with the announcement. Celeste Arlo was marrying Zachary Reed, heir to the Reed medical empire and a man known for his compassion, brilliance, and unwavering love. Celeste sat quietly in her office, holding the sample invite between her fingers, her eyes misty with emotion. She had waited for a moment like this, not for the grandeur, but for the peace it brought. No longer was she the girl begging for love from someone who never saw her. Now, she was a woman cherished wholly by a man who looked at her like she was the center of his universe. Every detail of the wedding planning reminded her how far she had come. The flowers, soft pink peonies, her favorite. The location, a cliffside garden overlooking the ocean, just like she always dreamed. It was hers, this life. Finally, it was hers. But not everyone saw the wedding with joy. Damien stared at the news headline, his fingers trembling as he read and reread the words. Celeste Arlo and Zachary Reed to wed in private ceremony. "She saved me," Reed says. He felt a sickening twist in his stomach. It should have been him. He had known her first, had held her when she cried, had kissed her in the dark. Yet he had tossed her aside like nothing, and now he was the outsider. Desperate, he dressed in his best suit, one of the few things he still owned that hadn't been sold off, and drove to her office. He waited outside like a ghost, ignoring the security guard's warnings. When she finally stepped out, his breath hitched. She looked like she had walked out of a dream, graceful and glowing. "Celeste," Damien called, stepping into her path. Her eyes froze, her body going still as ice. Zach stepped forward instantly, standing between them, but Celeste raised a hand. "It's fine," she said softly, though her voice carried a strength that echoed in the air. Damien approached her slowly, as if she might vanish. "I know I was wrong. I was blind, stupid, cruel. I lost everything the moment I let you go." Her eyes shimmered, but not with love, only with the weight of the past. "You didn't let me go," she replied. "You threw me away." Silence stretched between them, and the wind rustled through the trees, carrying away the last hope Damien had. He dropped to his knees, in front of her, in front of Zach, in front of a crowd of strangers. "I'm begging you. Please, just one more chance. I'll change, I swear. I've already changed. I was in a dark place, but you were my light. Celeste, I love you." His voice cracked at the end, his pride shattered like glass on the pavement. Celeste looked down at him, her face unreadable. "You say you love me," she said quietly, "but you only came looking when you saw someone else love me better." Her eyes turned to Zach. "He didn't wait until I became powerful. He loved me when I was healing, broken, quiet. He didn't need a second chance because he never failed me in the first place." The rejection was cold, final, irreversible. Humiliated, Damien watched as she walked away, hand in hand with Zach, never once looking back. Cameras captured the moment, him kneeling on the ground like a fallen prince, and her, a queen who had already moved on. The image went viral, begging the one he broke. Redemption denied. Online, people cheered for Celeste, calling her their hero. Sabrina saw it too and screamed into her empty apartment, tearing at the screens displaying Celeste's face. Every attempt to claw her way back to fame ended in rejection. She was offered a minor role in a low-budget reality show, and even those pulled after sponsors protested. Her punishment came not just from karma, but from a world that saw the truth too clearly. Meanwhile, Celeste continued walking into a future Damien and Sabrina would never be part of. The wedding day dawned with golden sunlight streaming through the sky, painting the morning in hues of hope and rebirth. Celeste stood by the window of her suite, dressed in a silk robe, her heart a mix of calm and quiet thunder. The makeup artist worked in silence, sensing the deep emotions rippling through the bride. Tears slipped down Celeste's cheeks, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of this moment. This was not just a wedding. It was a resurrection. Every vow she would take today symbolized her release from the chains of betrayal and heartache. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman transformed, elegant, poised, and radiant. For a moment, she remembered standing in the shadows of Damien and Sabrina, crying quietly while they laughed behind her back. Now, she stood beneath the spotlight, surrounded by admiration and love. Zach waited at the altar, his hands steady, his eyes locked on the path she would walk down. He wore a white suit that matched hers, a symbol of purity and beginning, not just tradition. When the music began and Celeste appeared, a collective gasp rippled through the guests. She floated down the aisle like a vision, her gown cascading like water, her veil a cloud of dreams, her expression regal yet warm. Zach's lips parted in awe, but it was the silent tear slipping down his cheek that said everything. Celeste took his hand and smiled, and the world seemed to slow for them. The vows they exchanged were not long, but they were raw and real. "You found me when I was drowning," Zach said, "and you held me until I could breathe again." Celeste's voice wavered as she replied, "You loved the broken pieces of me without asking me to be whole first." In the far back of the venue, hidden under sunglasses and a hat, Damien watched in anguish. His heart clenched as Celeste smiled at Zach, her eyes shining with a joy he had never seen before. The ache was unbearable. His mind played cruel tricks, imagining it was him standing beside her, promising forever. He remembered all the times she cried alone in their past life, begging him to just notice her pain, to hold her when she was falling apart. And he had turned away. Now she was happy without him. A sob caught in his throat, and he stumbled out of the ceremony, unnoticed, just another broken man in a world where love had passed him by. That night, he drank until the world blurred, waking up in a cheap motel with no one left to call. Meanwhile, Sabrina sat in a dimly lit club, trying to pretend she didn't care. But everyone was talking about the wedding. The tabloids were filled with Celeste's stunning photos, with headlines praising her strength and elegance. Sabrina's phone buzzed with cruel comments and sarcastic memes mocking her downfall. "Should have treated her better," one said. "Jealousy doesn't age well," another taunted. Desperate, she tried to post a glamorous photo of herself, but it was met with ridicule. Brands that once begged her to wear their designs now sent her cease and desist letters. She screamed at the screen, smashing her phone against the wall. The world had chosen its heroine, and it wasn't her. The karma she brought upon Celeste was now eating her alive, and there was no one left to blame. Back at the wedding reception, Celeste stood with Zach beneath a canopy of twinkling lights, their hands entwined. Her voice trembled as she gave her toast. "To everyone who ever doubted me," she began, "thank you. You taught me the value of silence, the strength in tears, and the power of rising again." The crowd stood, cheering, many with tears in their eyes. Zach pulled her close, whispering, "You're more than I ever dreamed of." As they danced, surrounded by love and laughter, Celeste knew one thing for certain. She had survived the fire, and it didn't destroy her. It crowned her. She was no longer the forgotten girl crying in the shadows. She was a queen, and the world had no choice but to watch her reign. And behind her, far away, the ghosts of her past would forever remain in the ashes. Celeste stood before a packed auditorium as the guest speaker at the International Women's Empowerment Conference, her presence radiating strength and grace. The crowd, composed of scholars, CEOs, and leaders, waited in hushed anticipation as she took the stage. Her story was now one of legend. The girl who had been mocked, betrayed, and humiliated, yet rose like a phoenix with wings made of steel. Her voice trembled slightly as she began, recalling the pain that once shattered her heart. "There was a time when I believed kindness made me weak," she confessed, her voice echoing across the hall. "But I've learned that survival isn't about hardness, it's about endurance." She shared the nights she cried alone, the betrayal she suffered from those she trusted most. Yet as her eyes scanned the audience, she smiled with quiet triumph. The girl who was cast aside became the woman who built her own throne. The room erupted in applause, loud, thunderous, and endless. Meanwhile, Damien sat in a hospital bed with a bandaged face and trembling hands, watching her speech on the tiny television mounted on the wall. Sabrina's last betrayal had left him scarred, not only in pride but in flesh. She had stolen what little remained of his inheritance and fled, framing him for the financial collapse of his company. His once imposing appearance was gone, replaced by hollow eyes and a hollower existence. The doctors whispered about how he sometimes woke up crying Celeste's name in the middle of the night. When her image appeared on the screen, smiling with a light he never gave her, he whispered, "I lost her forever." He tried to dial her number again, only to find it still blocked. He wrote her letters he never sent, apologies he could no longer voice aloud. Even his mother had stopped visiting, ashamed of what he had become. His second chance had come and gone, and Celeste had moved on, never once looking back. Sabrina's fall was brutal and merciless, far beyond what even karma had promised. After fleeing with Damien's fortune, she was caught in an international fraud investigation. Her mugshot went viral. The once glamorous socialite now appeared gaunt, with smudged eyeliner and a crazed expression. In prison, she became the joke of the internet, her every scream recorded and ridiculed. No one remembered her for her beauty anymore, only for her greed, jealousy, and pathetic downfall. She tried to reach out to Celeste in desperation, begging for forgiveness, offering confessions to the media. But Celeste never responded. The world had chosen who to remember, and it wasn't the woman who had destroyed others to feel powerful. Sabrina screamed into her cell walls each night, haunted by the face of the woman she once mocked. The universe had a long memory, and it was now paying her back in double, just as Celeste had once wept twice as hard. Celeste's wedding anniversary to Zach was held in an elegant garden surrounded by cherry blossoms, their petals fluttering like blessings from the heavens. He held her close as music played, whispering, "You're still the most beautiful miracle I've ever known." Their love had grown stronger through every storm, deeper with every quiet moment shared beneath stars and silence. He never tried to change her, only embraced her fully, even the scars she once hid from the world. That night, he presented her with a necklace engraved with the words, "Loved. Chosen. Always." Celeste wept softly in his arms, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming fullness of a heart that had finally healed. Around them were friends, students, and women she had inspired, proof that pain could be turned into purpose. Her past no longer defined her. It was merely the beginning of a story that now shone in gold. She was not just a survivor. She was a legend. As the night drew to a close, Celeste stood alone beneath the moonlight, remembering everything. The tears, the betrayal, the humiliation. But she no longer felt anger, only gratitude. She had been forced to lose everything in order to find herself. She whispered a quiet goodbye to the ghosts of Damien and Sabrina, releasing them into the wind. In the distance, Damien watched silently from behind a fence, his face hidden in shadows. He didn't try to approach her anymore. He just stood there, watching the woman he once crushed now rise beyond his reach. When she turned around to walk back to Zach, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a royal train, she didn't glance his way. That was his final punishment. Not rage, not revenge, but her indifference. Celeste had become the woman no one could touch. The crown they tried to steal was never theirs to wear.